welcome to another episode of Peanut and Bread Quarterly Slush Pile. We hope you're all doing well out there. I have a little bit of a cold again, but we're not going to pay any attention to that. We're still having construction at our sound studio, so three of us are here in the office at Drexel. For you today, we have two poems that we'll be discussing, and I'm Kathleen Volkmiller. I should probably start with that. That should be my lead. I'm Kathleen Volkmiller, and I direct the graduate program in publishing here. I am co-editor of the Peanut and Bread Quarterly, and yeah, I guess that's about sums it up. I'm behind my L-shaped desk, so I feel funny because I can barely see Sarah's face. She's half hidden behind a monitor. Sarah, peek from behind the monitor and say, hey.
Hello from over here. I am Sarah Eichert. I'm a third-year English major at Drexel University, and I'm the current editorial assistant for Peanut and Bread Quarterly. And to my left is Tim Fitz.
My name is Tim Fitz, and I teach here at Drexel University and Curtis Institute of Music. And I'm the author of a short story collection, Hypothermia, and a novel, The Soju Club. Woo-hoo! And I've been with the Peanut and Bread for about 3.5 years now.
Woo!
And in the bubble is Marion.
Greetings from over here. This is Marion Wren. I'm in Abu Dhabi, and I'm drinking green tea out of a lovely black mug that says "Right Like a Motherfucker." And this is from the Rumpus. It's part of their swag. It's a fabulous mug of green tea, and it feels very irreverent to be sitting with a mug of green tea with a big curse on it in Abu Dhabi, where I run the writing program, and I have been co-editing the Peanut and Bread Quarterly for some 20-odd years with Kathleen. Not that we do that from Abu Dhabi for 20 years, but I've been co-editing for 20 years. Greetings, all.
I miss you.
Oh, I miss you too, girlfriend.
Yeah, thanks for talking to me this morning. I was like half asleep to Marion, and I did a Skype and with me laying in bed and her rushing off to work, which is how our lives are, scrambled and upside down. But to remind our listeners, you can go look at the poems that we're about to discuss, so you can read along with us or look after the fact, whichever you'd like, on our podcast pages. So let's get started. I'll read this first one. Everyone should know that it's right justified, and it's mostly skinny, except for stanzas 3 and 4. I would say the shape in the end is fish or mermaid-like, if one looks at the entire thing. What would you guys say?
I think it looks like seaweed.
Okay, so we're still aquatic.
Yes, and I also want to say, I have a hunch this might look fantastic on your cell phone, on your iPhone, right? Like, because of that flush right doohickey she's got going on there, I bet it looks really cool in your hand. So this is my hunch, dear listeners. Do let us know.
Very interesting. We'll have to check. We'll have to look into that, and maybe we'll talk to our listeners about printing poems sideways in the book.
Yes.
Yeah, like we saw in that one book that we saw at AWP. Yep. But okay, enough all. Here we go. This is Alexis Smith. Drink like fish. Barmaid, mer-girl, hungover and strung along by Fishtown hookups, sighs, cigarette, swirled breath, baiting the boys outside the tequila, teal ombre, dip dye, willowing Cupid cheeks in frizzy rivulets, silver nose ring catching scratch light from her sunny Zippo, striking for a quick suck of smoke before she clocks in and goes under mid-shift. Mer server darts and dips to dodge darts sailing gamely through the dinner rush. A salty dives Friday night, sweat swell, stuffed to gills with oil slick sardine packs, leases, schools of bloated blowfish bros, hip loud clowns, doused in lager, spouting flotsam. For first fin doctor?
Oh, finder.
Finder?
Finder.
Finder?
Tinder. Tinder.
Finder is another
Finder.
thing like Tinder?
No, it's
I think so.
Oh, it's a play on words. Okay, sorry. Blowfish bros, hip loud clowns, doused in lager, spouting flotsam for first Fender dates, wishing they'd switched left, while on the edge of the din sit lone, grim, grizzled marlins, with bloodshot eyes and briny drinks and cheeks as rough as rusting swords, fish with trashed and tattered past mystique, like in theory cheery boardwalks turned gray and drizzly in the rain. The crowd, so many fathoms deep, our intrepid merkid gets weeded, yet she winnows through, serves swift, and swerves her sway away from ocular octopi, tracing her tail, quiet guys whose eyes snake after supple shapes like groping, sucking hentai vines. She hides and curls herself into the side of kitchen stairwell, coves herself in cellar shadow, slowed, savors time, slowing as her tongue skirts a salted rim. Lime stinging dry lips, Midori mellowing edge of eyeglass frames like green bottle shards worn smooth by sea.
Nice.
So, my apologies to Alexis. Sorry for those couple glitches there. Hopefully she'll forgive me, as will our readers and listeners when you see this on the page. It's a tough one to read due to its formatting. Though cool, though fun.
Yes, fun, super fun. Like she's
Super
having
fun.
so much. It's like so much energy and wit in the sound of the words and the sequencing of the words and where she's breaking the lines. It really is. It's a roll. You know, it really is a roll and a tumble.
Yeah. Another thing that I didn't mention about formatting or font or something is those very first words, barmaid mergirl, is in all caps. And then later, the fourth stanza, the word under is all alone and all in caps.
Yeah.
So she's done some interesting stuff, like as your the white space is really important here, as important as the line length.
Yeah. So it's funny with barmaid mergirl, the first line ends with a colon, and it's almost as if it wants to be read like a script, right? Like as if, I don't know, like these are the lines spoken by the barmaid mergirl, but it's not quite that. It's more like a sort of cinema camera over the shoulder of this character, right? Sort of like describing her and then seeing from her perspective. So when you get down to the under, which is also capitalized, it's actually not doing that script-like thing because
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but it has the colon too.
Yeah, it has the colon. So like the font or the typography looks like it's the same. Like you want to read it like it's a script, but it's actually tucked in the line before, right? So smoke, what is it? Striking for a quick suck of smoke before she clocks in and goes under. But now under is like announcing the next move of the poem. It's trippy. And I can't quite figure that out, but I like the way it sort of set me up to expect it to do one thing by that typographical look, but actually does something completely different. It's sort of like backfoots and changes direction.
I thought that it was the what happens in the opening with the barmaid mergirl section is above ground, like that's on the boardwalk, and then the under section is what's happening in her underwater life.
In the restaurant. That's now we're in there with her, right? Yeah.
But underwater.
Right.
Finder was
figuratively underwater.
Yeah. By the way, hi, Jason. Jason Schneiderman just joined us.
Hi.
He had some train incidents he might tell us about later. But in the poem, did you get to hear the whole thing? I know you saw it on the page, Jay.
I didn't get to hear it being read, but I've read the poem.
So Jason, just to double back on that, right? So the barmaid mergirl section, it's like she's gearing herself up to go into the bar, right? So that the barmaid mergirl is like she's getting her stuff together, takes a suck off her cigarette, and then goes in, right? And going in means she's going under. Like there's a kind of like in the weeds, underwater quality of being a server in a space like this.
Right. Well, yeah, I certainly don't read that she's literally underwater, but that it can feel like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, I thought it was literally underwater.
I thought it was, yeah.
But yeah, because I was trying. Because I was having the same question that you were having about kind of like how these two sections are distinguished. And did we already discuss the shape? I got really hung up on the shape.
Yeah. Well, we did, only to note that it reminds each of us of something different, but aquatic. There's an aquatic theme.
Okay.
Yeah, so the literally underwater makes me want to raise the question about the title. So it's called Drink Like Fish, and the like it feels like the key to the logic of the poem for me a little bit, because this is a really like aggressive analogy. Like being a server in a bar is like being underwater, and so all of the characters that she comes across in this dive are fished, as it were, right? They're transformed, right, into fishes, and even her gestures, her thought process, right, gets transformed by this really muscular analogy that the poem relies on.
Right. And I would say that I didn't see her as literally underwater because she did this metaphor so well and so consistently. I could see, briny jinks and cheeks and blowfish bros and all of these what did you call it, enfished, all of these enfished characters and images. I went right with it, that would be a lens through which one could see a bar on the boardwalk.
Yeah. Tim Fitz, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm wondering, is this poem embracing the culture it's writing about or describing, or is it critical of the culture that it describes? And that's where I'm hung up at. I'm having trouble figuring out if this person is like sort of, not this person, if the poem is sort of showing off and proud of this like hipster restaurant culture, or if it's mocking it.
Can it do both?
No, it can do both, but I'm not really sure where it's doing it. You know what I mean?
People are always snarky about their own workplace, right? Even as she doesn't quit and look for something else. she can do both, I think.
I was thinking a lot about those Mercy poems that Laura McCullough wrote.
Oh, yeah.
About, kind of like, and I think she has a much more critical perspective, where in kind of her presentation of that character, it's really kind of the character is caught up in something that she can't quite navigate or figure out. Whereas this feels much more like what it feels like to be inside of it.
Yeah. So I like that distinction, because it actually calls to mind the novel that was out maybe last summer or the summer before. Forgive me. It's Sweet Bitter, Stephanie Downler's book about a sort of fictional character's experience in a fancy restaurant in Manhattan in the sort of early 2000s, and it is a deep dive into almost like the sociology of working in a restaurant. You get the sort of like backstory of the back of the house experience.
Oh, yeah. I know.
You know what I'm talking about? So Sweet Bitter would be, to me, the analogy, because it's not necessarily like, it's kind of critical and kind of celebrating that life, of like total work, and play and work and play and work and play, and never being able to distinguish the two.
Mm-hmm. Loving it and hating it at the same time.
I'll also point out that Marion Wren's only film credit is as the head waitress restaurant in the film Surrender.
Damn, Jason Schneiderman. You just totally Marcel Prousted me, right?
When you were talking about the sociological knowledge of restaurants, I was like, well, actually, Marion.
Actually.
on screen.
Right.
It does feel very much kind of inside, and both kind of like the romanticization, but also the kind of the grimness, really knowing that space intimately.
What do you guys think of repetition of the same words and forms of the same words so close to each other? What does that give or take away from the poem? And of course, now I can't find an example, but let me look. Darts under mid-shift, server darts and dips to dodge darts, sailing gamely through the dinner rush. There's a lot of moments of that using the same words really closely together.
I have to say, like, when I was reading it, and it was very difficult because of things like that it had this kind of there's on one hand, I really like the fact that it's demanding. But on the other hand, I was having a really hard time sort of like staying grounded when a lot of that kind of pyrotechnic sound was happening. And in addition to the shape, and in addition to the metaphor, and in addition to, the scene, it just felt like a lot when I was reading it. Like, it felt like I was juggling a lot of balls to kind of stay inside the poem.
Is that in a good way?
For me, it wasn't.
Okay.
I spent years working as a dish dog in college and high school. And I really love reading about poems that explore that territory. When I either learn something new that I always knew, or I see things in a different way, or it helps me understand the order. I mean, I know George Orwell's Down and Out in Paris and London is like a pretty high comparison, but it's interesting how that those restaurants he worked in Paris in the 1920s are so similar to the structures in Florida in the 1990s, where there's just still that same sort of sadomasochistic vibe that's going throughout the whole thing. And so I'm not sure that I'm feeling the connection here the same way as I do reading other stories about the restaurant, which I really gravitate towards.
Yeah.
I really know.
I do too. I was in the restaurant industry, and my family was a lot, my siblings. So I feel like I grew up in theirs as well. So the reason why I asked the question I asked about the redundancy of certain word choices is I really dig this, and I think she did an amazing job of keeping the metaphor going and describing everybody in this enfished manner. But I didn't understand what her intent might have been on the repetition of those poems. Of those words. I was not asking rhetorically. I can't determine what her intent was.
Can I maybe I'm just dim-witted here. I don't see more than that. Like that, maybe I'm just not seeing the repetition of exactly the same word. I get the repetition of sound, right? I get the sort of assonance and consonants that she's doing throughout. But I've got the double darts there. But do you guys see more of it?
Marion, I'm with you. I only find the one. And if it's only that one, then I'm not opposed to it. So
no, but I have to, let me just jump.
Well, maybe it is sounds. Like in that last stanza on the first page there, serves swift and swerves her way away.
Very close.
Yeah. Maybe
since that's slowing, like it's very, very close, but it's not actually the same word.
Maybe since I was the one reading it, it just felt like that.
It does feel like that, though.
It does, yeah.
But that I think is actually part of the magic, right? Like she's making different words, like trick your brain into thinking that they're so sonically similar as if to be the same, and they're not, right? And so when you asked that question, Kath, it just like triggered something. I've been working with Ada Lon's poem, the last poem in the book, This Big Fake World, right? So it's epilogue, This Big Fake World. And it's a 16-line, really well-crafted poem. And boy, does she repeat words, right? And it's totally strategic. And it's a different kind of music that she's going. It's like she's got going this kind of love dub heartbeat, because that poem really is about like reclaiming a sense of the self by kind of nesting with the consumer and materialist crap that would threaten to overwhelm us, right? But if you like build a nest out of moon pies and clocks and barbed wire, right? Like you've got some agency, right? And so her poem is super hopeful at the end of this book, and the rhythm is capturing that hope, and the repetition of those words is capturing that hope. And my cuckoo clock says it's been half an hour since we started talking about this poem. But this Mergirl situation, I think the language that she's using amplifies the speed with which she's like jumping from thing to thing to thing, right? Which I think maybe activates what Jason's talking about. Like maybe it feels like too much for the reader with all the other things that are going on, but it's also quite, I would say, like wild to see her do this. And the wildness for me cuts right through the slush pile. Like, I actually haven't seen something this with this kind of velocity in a while.
Right.
I think that her use of language and metaphor is so strong, and it's very captivating. The thing that I'm wondering is what does this poet want me to take from reading this?
Yeah.
I had a great time reading it while I was reading it. I had a great time, listening to the various alliterations and things like that, and like how she's able to turn phrases like Tinder into Finder. But I just want to know, like, okay, so why did I read this other than for that metaphor and for your use of language? Like, what am I as the reader taking away from this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the
Yeah.
message?
Like, how does this reach out beyond the restaurant world? It's got to.
Yeah. That's what I'm struggling with this poem.
Literature to do that? Like, isn't literature's obligation just to kind of present us with, like, do we have to actually like have a takeaway or a paraphrasal moral?
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say too, Jason. Like, isn't the look in enough? The look in the world through this lens, isn't that enough? Like, say, next time you're in a bar late at night, some of these images might pop in your mind, Well,
let me jump on Sarah's side there for a second. It's not like I need a thesis, right? And it's not like I need a deliverable, right? Like a takeaway. But I do want an idea, right? And the idea might be a little bit more of a capacious way of thinking about that notion of a takeaway, right? That there's some gravitational center here. That sure, it's a poem about a bar, but it's also about being obliterated by the pace of work in that bar, right? And that feels like again, like the gravitational force holding all these pieces together. And maybe that part's blurry with all the sort of acumen here. That idea bit feels a little maybe fuzzy.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. Thank you, Marian.
Vulcan mind meld, sister. Vulcan mind meld. I see you.
Do you guys think that we should vote and go? Yeah? We're voting to vote?
We're voting to vote.
Okay. So Tim and Sarah and I are in the office, and we're going to do a 1, 2, 3 shoot. And we're going to wait for Ryan to let us know. Okay, that did not get in.
Glug, 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 glug.
Oh, man.
Wow. Fascinating. Love working with you. Fascinating.
Super close, but it didn't go in. And I can tell by some of the reactions here that people are surprised.
So Alexa, run, don't walk to the next literary magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what we could say to her as the reason why, like if she, you know.
I think there's
What
just
could she
different
do to-
resonances. You know, like
Right.
like the one difference between I think your position and my position was it didn't resonate with me the same way for whatever reason,
Mhm.
some subjective reason. But
Mhm.
it's not like I thought the poem was terrible. It
Right.
didn't resonate enough for me to say yes. It
Right.
did for you to say yes, and that's just
Yeah. Yeah, it was close. And there are 5 of us.
But-
There's an odd number. So,
but definitely, like Marion said, when it's that close, you know, this 1 or 2 literary magazines down the line,
Yeah.
the numbers are going to shift.
sure.
When it's that close, it's always like that.
Sure.
Even if we had like one different person on the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on. Marion, you're going to take care of this next poem.
Yeah, so we have a poem by the poet Shabnam Piryaei, and the poem is called Pine. And it looks quite different from the poem that we just saw of Alexa's. It's a little bit more conventional, but it's free verse and it's got some, sort of long lines, a couple short lines. You'll see it on the liner notes of our podcast.
The liner notes of our podcast.
I'm sorry, I just snorted because I called them liner notes.
I know, that's why I'm laughing too. And just so you guys know, and so our audience knows, she had submitted 3 pieces to us, and 2 of them were sucked up by other places before we could get to them. So yay for you. And let's have Marion read Pine.
Okay, so this is Shabnam Piryaei's Pine. I spy you on a rock at the edge of a cliff, a tiny figure hunched against heaven, the stupid expanse of a building-less sky. I fear dropping you because I can. Above you, an angle of birds know precisely how to navigate distance is like this, leaving me excess space to play with my weapons. I hum uncertain beyond the provocation of your back. Strands of me dangle from my shirt, unwilling to be discarded. No God laughs while slitting the throats of his children, I think. You will stay at the edge of a cloud-rivered abyss. In another expanse, clouds convene over the raft of a survivor, lip split and issuing confessions. Here, crickets have convened. Shuddering at the scrape of evening's tongue, I lull for your shadow to stand.
Very nice. Thank you.
So what do you think?
I got the idea that this is a poem about watching a loved one suffer with depression.
No.
Mm.
Wow, Sarah, how do you get that? Can you talk me through that reading?
Sure. I mean, right off the bat, this speaker is talking about a you on the edge of a cliff, and that's already brings the mind to think of suicide, I think, and just these images of they're a little grim and dreary, which lends itself. And I think that line, no God laughs while slitting the throats of his children, I think, to me, like, I don't know, a lot of this, I feel like this poem is in some ways about death. And after thinking it through that, like, I thought of suicide because of the images of this cliff. And it's like especially the last few lines where the speaker is like, has such a strong desire for this person to stay or stand at this cliff and not move, to be calm. So.
Got you. Okay, thank you.
Now that's all I can see.
What did you see before?
I wasn't sure what to see before, but there's some things that I liked was the I think at the end of the line, no God laughs while slitting the throats of his children, I think, so that's, I like that doubt. I like the angle of birds know precisely how to navigate. I think that's something that nobody really talks about, but that always amazes me when I see the huge flocks of birds when I'm driving down the road. They all turn at the same time.
Yeah.
But then you forget about it and you don't talk about how amazing it is. But every time it's like, oh, I wish I could show somebody this.
Yeah.
And then that moment's gone. And I like the stupid expanse of a building with sky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, these moments were happening, and I liked the images. And the first couple times reading through, I felt like it was getting to something important, but I wasn't there yet because I hadn't caught up to it. I didn't feel like it wasn't in the poem, and it was just a bunch of images that didn't tie together. I felt like this is going to require more of me than a simple poem.
Mm-hmm. Sure, it's incredibly dense.
I was thinking of it in the context of kind of the refugee crisis and the pine on the rock as a kind of metonym or stand-in or metaphor for the last figure left in a kind of bombed out, evacuated, fled space. And that's kind of the no God lasts while slitting the throats of his children, and sort of the pine being both the mirror image and the symbol of this lone person seeing this abyss that like everything's about to fall into.
Yeah. Clouds convene over the raft of a survivor.
Yeah.
Lip split and issuing confessions.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think I was more along those lines, Jason, when I was thinking of it. I was thinking of it that way as well. Another typographical question, formatting question. She doesn't start lines after periods with capital letters. Keeps everything lowercase.
Right.
What's that about?
The only letter that's uppercase is I.
Yeah.
Not even the word God is capitalized. Which
Right.
I thought was
Oh,
interesting.
yeah, right.
I wasn't sure what to make of that, but I noticed it.
The eyes are did you say the eyes are capitalized?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
I
only
was
thing that's
zoned out
capitalized.
for a second. Yeah, that's
I'm trying not to be bothered by it, and I'm glad that in space. But I just never understand why people like
Make that choice. Yeah, and the title is also lowercase, which is, the word pine.
a flow between the previous sentence and the next sentence. The capital letter visually forms like a little bit more of a barrier in English because that's what we do. If you were in German, it wouldn't make any difference. I don't know. I'm never really on board with people eccentrically playing with typography. I mean, even E. Cummings, like it seems where how he does that thing where there's no space around the commas, but then there's space. It's like, it would have been better if you hadn't done that.
Oh, don't you dare. It was my first poetry love, as he was, I'm sure, for so many others.
Yeah.
But anyway.
I wasn't sure if it was more of giving the I more authority. I don't know why the I would need more authority because I'm still unsure of who this I is.
that bothers me a little bit. That only the I is capitalized, but then if you made it lowercase, it would bother me more.
Great.
I don't think it would change the meaning of the poem that much just to make it normal. What
would be changed?
I really enjoyed Sarah and Jason's readings of the poem, regardless.
Yeah. And
But I do think of if whenever I see the lowercase first line of the first word of the sentence, like Jason, I immediately think of E. Cummings, and then I'm kind of out of the poem for a little bit. He took. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't do it without thinking.
A lot of people don't capitalize letters. I mean,
yeah, but you think of it. I mean, you could.
There's a professor here who doesn't capitalize his name, and I have never asked him, but he really doesn't. When he publishes and on everything, he keeps his name lowercase. So I'm not sure exactly what all the motivation is behind that, but I just thought we should note that for our listeners in this poem. So is this too dense? Can we break it up? Is it wonderful that Sarah thinks it's suicide and Jason thinks it's
Refugees.
I really like that about the poem. Like these two different angles, and that I actually feel like for each way the poem's read, both of those angles, I feel like my heart goes out to them more. Like I really feel like I see the loneliness of somebody on the edge, and I see the loneliness of the refugees and the desperation and just the certainty that things are going to go wrong. And it helps confirm those emotions for me. So in that way, this poem does reach out to me, what the poem's about. I have an amazing takeaway from these.
Okay.
The only, I mean, I really love the language in this poem. The only thing that gave me pause, well, I shouldn't say there were two things that gave me pause. One was uncertain on a single line, and the other was strands of me dangle from my shirt.
Yes.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a fan of that one.
What does it mean?
I was thinking hair.
That's true. Your hair is so you, even when it's the
curly-haired woman whose hair sheds constantly. I actually, thank you, Sarah. That's a very familiar and specific image. But strands of me dangle from my shirt, unwilling to be discarded. Dang, like that is okay. If that's hair, that's a great image. But I don't get how it resonates with the others in the piece. So, and my head went to, and I forget the name of it. What is the religious clothing that Jewish people wear, and it's a shawl, and you can see the
prayer shawl is the tallis. If you're talking about the thing that like your head goes through and then the fringes stick out, that's it.
Not the tzitzit. I think I'm talking about the tallis, which is like the prayer shawl, or is that so? And if you would you just wear that under clothing, like you would wear like a shirt and then the tallis hangs out the bottom?
The tallis you only wear over. I mean, you use it for morning prayers,
okay,
and like a couple of other prayers, but yeah, you just it's over whatever you're wearing. It doesn't ever go under. The tzitzit goes under. Like if you see
maybe I'm thinking of the tzitzit. Yep.
The strings sticking out, like sort of like hanging out of like their pants.
Yeah.
Like that because that goes under your shirt. That goes.
Yeah.
That's under your shirt.
So that although the strands dangling from the shirt, that's the image that came to mind. But I think Sarah's right. It's strands of me dangle from my shirt. So that image sort of evaporates for me. I can't quite hold it. It's a little bit more ghostly and phantom. Like I can't get it to appear clearly in my mind.
But I think, the rest of the poem, I think is strong enough to carry it.
Okay, I think we're ready to vote. Are we?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, let's go. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, shoot, wait. Sorry.
No, it's 1, 2, 3, shoot, not oh, shoot, wait.
Shoot, wait.
Okay, this one is in.
Woo! Woohoo!
All right. So, one in, one out. And we've talked a good long while, so I'm wondering if we should talk about anything else that we need to. I thought of another topic that we could talk about, and that's rejection. That's about all these rejection games I heard people speaking of at AWP. But vote to keep talking or to sign off. How long has it been, Ryan? About 40 minutes.
Oh, that's
okay,
good.
Let's talk about rejection games. So it seemed like, I'm sure people have done this forever, but it seemed like I kept hearing about people playing rejection games with their friends. And so that we're all on the same page. Some people attributed this to an article that Roxane Gay published on Pank, in which she talks about her own experiences as an editor first, and how hard it is to reject people with the, like we just had to reject Alexa and it hurts, it's not like we have fun throwing things back. And then she even admits to her own stats, and she says she's rejected about 78% of the time. And the bottom line message of her essay is getting rejected is part of the game, and get out there and get rejected. So I met a woman who said that she's with a group of other people. They give themselves a certain date, like a month, 6 weeks or whatever, and everybody accrues rejections and has to share them with each other as soon as they get them, and they keep account. And then whoever gets the most rejections gets taken out to dinner by the others.
I think he or she should buy dinner for others. Rejected the most.
No, well, that's why she's a winner, because she's trying the hardest. That's the point, right? And then another group I met, a couple different people I met, said they were doing 100 rejection race with their friends. Who hits 100 first gets something. So what do you guys think? And did you hear of any other ways to play the rejection game with your writerly friends?
I guess it depends on how you feel about rejection.
What do you mean?
Yeah. Well, the way that Tim just said that that person should pay for dinner, that would mean that Tim views, or you might view rejection as a bad thing. And so
I view it as a terrible thing, but I also review it. I also see it as something that's like that is incredibly important. And so you have to confront the rejection, and you have to figure out why. And there's certain there's certain magazines where I get rejected, and if they say anything positive, I know it's going to be accepted within a couple weeks
by somebody else, like what you just said about the Alexis Smith piece.
I love getting rejected by the New England Review. I always almost get in there, and then they send me a nice letter, go back and forth, and ask for more stuff. But for whatever the reason is, and it's always a good reason, somebody else likes that. They once said it was a little too weird, but then the next magazine a week later said we love the weirdness of it. So I wasn't upset about it. I just thought, okay, well, this is.
Well, so you're only proving the point, though, that you've got to keep trying. That's Roxane Gay's point, and the point of these rejection games is, like basic sales. Every no gets you closer to a yes, right?
Yeah, but now I'm saying this publicly now, but for me at home, it's a very private thing. I don't like seeing the rejection. It always hurts.
Right.
I'm not like, yay, New England Review said no. I wish they would say yes, but it's out of my control. But I do get to know how the work is resonating with at least part of the audience landscape.
Right.
And so, and then sometimes they say, not the New England Review, another magazine will say no, says no all the time. And I get really upset about it. And I go look at their work, and I don't see why they're saying no to me and yes to some other people. But that also is a challenge to, find those other, you got to hit it hard, whatever you're going to do, whether you're playing game or not, you got to hit it hard.
Right.
And be very aggressive about it. So yeah, however you confront it, it is interesting at first for a while that this happens, but it does. Especially if you have ever had a losing streak, it wears on you. You have to start. Yeah.
You need a win.
You've got to look at yourself in the mirror. That's hard during a losing streak. But you keep doing it because there's only one way out of the losing streak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you know what, Tim, you just said it too. It's like, it wears on you and it makes you feel solitary. And if rejection makes you feel ashamed, that's a terrible emotional burden, right? Mm-hmm. So the game part of it, the fact that you're playing with a friend or a work, like a writing buddy, you've built a sort of like strategic network, right? Of like folks with linked arms around, or, into the fray with linked arms, right? And that's a support system, like in the truest sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that image, Marion. Write a poem about that. Linked arms, marching. I'm just picturing all the marches we've been on lately. Yeah. I love it.
There are also a lot of people out there who see rejection as bad juju. So if you're getting rejected, they don't want to stand near you. And I think that's the majority of the people in the world. People don't want to be around people who are failing. I think, I don't want to live my life like that and stuff, but I know there's plenty of people, they ask how everything's going, say, oh, my book got rejected. And you see a look in their face like, oh, your life's not going anywhere, is it? And you're like, I just internalize all that.
No. What was? Oh my God! What? Blanche and the little old ladies who lived in Florida. What was that TV show?
Golden Girls.
Oh, Golden Girls.
Golden Girls. Right? So do you remember Estelle, like the little Italian lady? Is that what her name was? Estelle.
Estelle Getty.
Wow, Mary, you're going into uncharted territory.
Hold on. So she used to say, like, if somebody came up with her with bad news, she'd say, "Get away from me, you're bad luck."
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, Tim, not to be argumentative with you, but I've never felt that way or observed that from others, like that it would be a contagious situation.
Yeah, no, I don't think everybody feels that way, but there are many, many, many people who do feel that way.
Well, like you said, and the writer being rejected herself might feel that way, right? Like that's what shame is. It isolates.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if the game takes the sting out of it, then, go ahead and play the game. But I don't know, like, I mean, I did a terrible thing.
Well, tell us.
A journal I've been trying to get into for about 15 years. And, and I have journals where, like, I'll like, I had one journal, like, in the old days, there were different size rejection letters. Like I worked my way up from the like 3x5 piece of like form paper to like a full like 8.5 by 11. And there were like 3 or 4 intermediate stages. And like, then the editor changed and, like the last letter had said, "This isn't right for your debut." And then the editor was, right. So anyway, but not that journal, a different journal. An editor wrote to me and said, that he was sorry that he'd held the work for so long, but that it was because he respected it and because, he hopes that it wouldn't discourage me from submitting again.
Yeah.
And I didn't wait to hit send. And I wrote back, "I've been submitting for 15 years. Why would I stop now?"
Jason, I probably said this.
That's not a terrible thing. That's your terrible thing?
Yes. If someone says to you, like, "Please keep sending me work," and you say to them, like, "Please, you think you can discourage me?"
Yeah, I got rejected by a magazine for about the 5th time. This is about 10 years ago. And they sent me this rejection letter, like, "Don't feel like your work isn't good enough, hang in there." This real sort of pitying rejection letter. So I sent them a letter back saying, "I'm not sitting on the edge of my bed with a box of razor blades. I just submitting to a magazine."
No, you didn't.
Get over yourself. I did.
That's much terribler.
And they sent back and said, "Don't submit." And I sent back and said, "I won't."
Get the heck out of here.
But I feel like that's ridiculous to think like, "Oh, you poor writers, you get rejected." That's stupid. Like it's just the game. You just go, you get rejected or you don't. It's fine.
But it's also, it is gendered. Like Tin House did, I think it was Tin House who did a study, and they found that when you reject men, they'll continue to respond no matter how you reject them. Women will only not only, but as a trend, women resubmit if they're asked to. But if you send a rejection letter to a woman that says, "We really liked this, we're not going to take it, but please send us more work," that's the condition under which women will resubmit. But men, it doesn't matter what you say in the subject.
I'm sorry. Men, it's a whole different ball game. I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but I did one of those 5-minute dating things once, the speed dating.
Oh yeah.
And the hosts spoke to the men and the women beforehand, about the rules of the game and everything. And they specifically said, women, if you laugh a lot at the guy and smile a lot, they're going to think you like them. And when we go to match up later, they'll be dumbstruck that you didn't choose them. They were actually telling the women to not be too friendly if they didn't think they were going to like the guy. I promise you it's true.
Not the woman's. Oh my
It's the woman's fault. They're just saying that
men will not understand that they're being rejected. Right. Any encouragement is huge encouragement, is my point. Yeah.
I feel like, going back to this topic, I feel like we shouldn't internalize rejection, but I don't know if we should necessarily celebrate it. Just take the rejection and be like, all right, what can I do to not get rejected? And not count how many rejections you get. I don't know.
Well, that used to be a thing.
And of course, I'm new to the game, so
I was when I was starting out, a lot of people had, instead of, I mean, these games seem much healthier. Everyone had like, you know, their files of rejections that they thought, you know, they were going to show the world that, you know, like these people who'd rejected them would be so sorry once they were famous.
Yes. Well,
Like,
true.
like, I mean, it's just not going to happen.
Who was it? I think it's F. Scott Fitzgerald in the end. Somebody, and I apologize, listeners, we'll make sure we get this on the page correctly, but somebody huge, like F. Scott Fitzgerald, said, thank you to everybody who rejected me. And he like named it, like to the 84 publishers who said no first.
Right.
Yeah. So it all happens.
You know, the first 3 stories that I published, I wish I had gotten rejections for, because now they're out there and there's nothing I can do about it. So sometimes the thing you think is in your favor is not in your favor. So you have to have some perspective.
Well, I mean, CLMP says they can't even count how many lit mags we have going right now because there's so many online. And, you know, I think they said the number's somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000. That's how nebulous it is, how unable they are to count. So being published is all kind of relative too, right? In a way. So there goes the cuckoo clock again. We'll take that as a signal to say thank you, listeners, and thank you, Marion and Jason and Tim and Sarah and Ryan, our sound engineer. Again, the work is on our podcast pages. Tell us what you think about rejection games, and if you have any really cool ones, let us know. Email us directly or put it up on our Facebook or respond to this event. We have so many ways to communicate. So I guess that's it. Keep reading. Thank you very much. Woo!
Yay.